So I was a really great investigative reporter, and I got fired for what became known as
Confessions of a Redheaded Reporter.
Among her disclosures, she's napped in a news car.
Well, I was thinking that I was being snarky and funny.
I was on the Today Show.
What was the secret that you got fired for?
And the problem is I'm too open-minded. It started with me reading the Bible front to back and actually in historic order. I started seeing patterns in everything. And I started seeing how
So I gotta welcome our first guest to the show. Her name is Shea Allen. She's actually a personal friend of mine. So I used to be a journalist in my previous career, and that's where I met Shea working on a show actually. And then I came to find out she had this alter ego that was very spiritual. So I wanted to bring her on and kind of share her story. Shea, why don't you introduce yourself? Who were you before you kind of delved into the spiritual side of yourself?
Hi, I'm Shea. I consider myself still an investigative journalist, but I'm an independent investigative journalist now, one that particularly looks into like conspiracy theories, spiritual awakenings, what I like to call spiritual sciences. It's this idea that there's a merging of journalism and spirituality, and that through, an open mind and an objective sort of way of looking at things, you can find the truth. But I wasn't always, I feel like my whole career, I was always talking about things I wasn't allowed to talk about. So I started out as a reporter, producer in Atlanta, moved over to Huntsville, Alabama. I seem to always just get myself into things. So the first time I went viral was 2013, and I got fired for
Confessions of a Redheaded Reporter.
clickbait nationally, internationally, like on the cover of the Sydney Morning Herald, the Daily Mail, like, I was on the Today Show. All the Today Show anchors, including Matt Lauer, sat there and mocked me for being fired for a blog post that I thought no one would read. So they were just confessions, like things like, I know how to twist my body to be skinnier on camera. I've taken naps in the news car. Most of my good sources have crushes on me. They were all sort of like things you're not supposed to say, because they got you working 60, 70-hour work weeks. And there is a bit of like a, misogyny within the news world for women. And so these were tongue-in-cheek confessions, but that also made me very unpopular with the network. And I got fired for it.
So what was the secret that you got fired for?
That I've gone braless on air before, and no one's ever been the wiser. Right. Because that's the thing. And to this day, you go into Google, braless reporter, whose face pops up. So it's great for my credibility as a journalist. But before that, I had won the AP Investigative Reporter Award for the state of Alabama, not very long before I was fired. I had exposed all kinds of corruption within FEMA disaster relief funds having to do with the tornado in Alabama, and that had gone through, and I was looking into stuff with the Alabama Attorney General. So I was a really great investigative reporter. And then I got turned into a meme. So I had to, kind of reset from that. And so that's when I came to Atlanta and started kind of working behind the scenes, still in television, but just, I was sort of like, I had my scarlet letter, my braless scarlet letter, you know what I mean? So I had to find out another way. And so I started working for myself, and also, kind of like freelance producing for different television shows, and met you. With a bra on. I think I had a bra on. I had to start wearing one. But I don't on TikTok, and it's so funny every time I don't, and I get on TikTok, and I'm like, I should just own that brand at this point. Like, I should just own Braless Reporter as a brand, because I ran from it for so long. So
how did you start having the spiritual, because I know on your TikTok you're very out there in terms of all your content. How did you when did the revelations start coming to you? Like, when did the information start coming to you?
So oddly enough, it started with me reading the Bible. Front to back, and actually in historic order. So if you know the chapters of the Bible, they're not written in order historically. So you can actually pull in other context from history, and you can start matching the stories within the Bible to an actual historical context. And it gives you a lot more understanding of what these stories mean on like a metaphorical level. And that was sort of what started happening to me. Was I started seeing patterns in everything. As a journalist, when we're trying to figure out causality of things or why things are happening, we look at who has a motive in it, right? Who has a reason, to want to tell the truth or not tell the truth or lie, or how do we, I wouldn't say it's a manipulative mindset, but it's definitely analytical. And so I started looking at analytically, like what, and I felt the Holy Spirit in the Bible, which is the crazy thing. I felt the Holy Spirit coming through the words and saying the information's in here. It's just not literal. It's been the information is in here. And so when I started seeing all this symbology, and I started seeing how, in fact, the church had been used to control the people, and everything had been flipped. And we all had the ability to have Christ consciousness. We could all have Christ within us. And then from there, it just piddled out into like, how many ways has this been exploited in a way that like made sense to me? Like local government, corrupt courts, the voting system, what they're putting in the foods, privatized prison systems, like the Federal Reserve. And it was just like, as an investigative reporter, I was like, now the MO makes sense.
You didn't mention COVID-19.
Everything we watch on mainstream media, interestingly enough, there may be, everything is a shade of gray. First of all, there's no yes or no. It totally did happen or it totally didn't happen. Was it manufactured to create an energetic response from the people? 100%. 100%. Did it change the way life is today? Absolutely. And then who is responsible for it? Well, somebody is. Somebody is. Even if energetically it's just a reflection of how the parasitic energies that run within the governments, the elite powers that be, those that would keep us divided along lines of race or gender or political party, they eat off of us parasitically. And COVID was a great example of, they needed to print some money.
A lot of money.
They needed to make a lot of money. And how did they find ways to issue grants and inject money into the economy to prop up all of these corporations that otherwise would have? That's what they did. And so the thing, that's what you start, I think, to look at when you, as an awake journalist, is like, there's ramifications to the spiritual truths. It's not all just like, there's ramifications, and then there's a responsibility, which is probably why I would assume why you're feeling called to do this podcast, is because once you see it, there's a responsibility.
Once you see, you can't unsee it, first of all, and then secondly, there's a responsibility to help others who may be having some sort of revelations themselves, right?
The thing about it is what I found also with a spiritual awakening is, I had to leave Atlanta. I had a business, a video production business I was running. I was doing a lot of like social media content for companies and brands. Basically every bit of content I made, in order for it to be profitable to me, had to be sponsored by something.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody had to make a freaking profit off of it. Like I had to prop up a product, or like take a stance, or like support a organization, and I had to put my face on that. And I found it was gagging me from saying what I wanted to say, and just my honest observations, because of what is this, how am I going to represent that brand? That brand's not going to want to associate with me because I'm talking about this or this. And when you see how deeply run it is, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, all of consumerism within these big box stores, like even the medical system, like the insurance companies, like all the bureaucracy, and you see how it's like, which is why I had to run off to the woods in Colorado and just find a place where I could support myself and be me without having to, because I was always pissing somebody off. Mm-hmm. I was always saying something that wasn't supposed to be said in terms of whatever the sponsor was for whatever, and that's what sucks about this economy, is like, I don't know how many people you've seen recently, they're getting fired. There was that awesome girl that did that song from Waffle House, and she got canned. Like, she just did a video of her and the wait staff washing dishes and like singing to some trending song. She got, after 6 years of working there, the fact that we're owned by these companies. I went through it a long time ago on a really public stage, but now even to watch people, like, social media but it will free us if we use it correctly. you know?
It's definitely helping in the education of the masses. I feel like the stuff that the mainstream does not want us to know. Like people are learning through other creators, right? Like yourself and like others. So let's transition now to your TikTok because you call yourself We Are Christ. Do you feel
Mhm.
like that's kind of presumptuous to say we are Christ? Like, what's your take on that?
So we are Christ. So you're Christ, I'm Christ. We all have the capacity for a Christ consciousness. Now, when I talk about a Christ consciousness, this is not Christian Jesus. Christian Jesus. In fact, there wasn't even a J in Hebrew. So let's just get that out of the way. That's not even his freaking name. Christian Jesus, after the gentleman that was sacrificed, became something that was patented and owned and then used by organizations, charities, churches, the monarchy to control people. Jesus fell out of it. Yeshua fell out of it a long time ago. Christ consciousness, we are Christ, is this idea, and it's not an idea because it's a freaking truth, that when people spiritually awake, they awake to a collective unity, a collective like my experience is impacts your experience. We are tied together. That's why we see all these mirrors of our life happening in the themes and the archetypes of other people's life. Christ conscious means we've connected back to our eternal nature, which if you think about reincarnation and beliefs like this, when they told us that death was finite, when the church said you better come to me and bring the money because otherwise you're going to burn in hell, and they erased reincarnation, we then lived in fear of death and in fear of the mortal coil. So Christ consciousness, again, is more of this idea of we are all eternal, reincarnated, skin bag after skin bag, vessel after vessel, divinely guided and protected and provided for. And that's another thing that's essential to Christ consciousness is you must confront fear, because in doing you're confronting a fear. What you're finding is I'm protected and provided for. Holy crap, doesn't really matter what is coming. And people don't like words like chosen ones, or I know people talk about 144,000 or whatever this is. These are all just words for the same thing. This is this idea that there are what I think are soul fractals or soul groups. These groups of individual who have a collective manifest destiny, and that the connecting of these people is ultimately what is going to lift the veil and trigger, people like to call it, the new earth or whatever the heck it is. It's essentially, it has to be a fall before something new can happen. And it's what happens with this is late stage capitalism. This isn't too much of a spiritually, woo woo phenomenon. This is just what happens with civilizations
The
and
cycles.
nations over
Mhm.
thousands of years. It's a cycle. What Christ consciousness, or those that are living in the Christos, are people that have shed all this stuff and can now see that there is some sort of divine plan, divine story to this, and we're not living in fear because we know who we are, and we know that this is just a natural process, and it's got to come down, and if it's going to come down, I'm going to be the one that brings it to its knees. That's my job, to build the bridge. I may not be able to see the results of all of this work, right? But I know that I am laying the foundation of a bridge that's going to take people. And so it's a collective mission, Christ consciousness. It's that is the reason we get up and breathe every day, and because we're just called to do it.
So you just dropped a lot of gems on, I think, the audience. So for those that might be new to a lot of the concepts you just shared, like how did you come to learn about these differing Christian ideas that have been changed over the years? Like how did you come to this information? Why do you treat it as fact? Like how did it become a part of your core beliefs?
Studying Gnosticism. So I've always been somebody that's like super into religions and philosophy and psychology and basically human sciences, right? That stuff really interests me. And again, once I read the Bible historically, as I mentioned at the beginning, I then started to read the history of the different books in the Bible and the books that had been removed from the
Mhm.
Bible, and the evolution of that text over history. And so by going back and reading some of these older texts that used to be included in Gnosticism, so like 0 AD, Romans are hunting the Gnostics, right? The Gnostics are the family and the tribe of Jesus. And then also, this is really interesting, but what really opened my eyes is during this time after I read the Bible and I'm starting to read all these, the book of Enoch, the book of Mary Magdalene, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of these older texts. I went to get Reiki for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And the universe likes to work with me in synchronicity. So I don't believe in coincidences. So anytime I meet somebody and they give me something, and it's always appointed. So I went to this Reiki thing, and this woman told me afterwards, she goes, I need you to read a book. I was like, okay. She's like, it's called Anna, Grandmother of Jesus. I
I've
was
read
like,
that
okay.
book. That book is very deep.
Have you read that book?
I listened to the audiobook online. There was a YouTuber who read the book. So yeah, I listened to it.
And there was something about that book that triggered, it almost felt like a DNA memory or something. It felt so like resonant truth. And it wasn't so much that like I took those words within it was like it transported me into a time where I could look around and gather information on my own, if that makes sense at all. And so I've sort of always like had this resonance with the Essenes, with the Gnostics. Like it almost feels like soul memory. So that's just sort of where I started with reading ancient texts. And then from there, there's so many places you can fall. And this is something I warn people, like you can fall into spiritual psychosis when you get to this point. Like, do you know what I'm talking about?
I
Like,
do. Yep. Paranoia. Like, what is this? Like, oh my God, this has all been hidden from us. And yeah,
yeah.
paranoia. Yeah.
And so like at this point, it definitely became like, once I became aware that there was all this stuff that had been hidden from us. I mean, like I spent 18 months on the Library of Congress's website every single day.
I think I remember
Like,
when you were posting a lot of TikToks about what you were learning from. Yeah, I think I remember.
and this is the Library of Congress. Like, this is the Library of Congress.
Right.
And so I'm finding all of this newspaper coverage and research articles. I found like PubMed, it's the National Health Organization's medical research database, and started reading. Just all you got to do is just read the titles of some of these studies. I started looking at Google patents, like, and so when you get to the point that you're like, all right, I've seen enough to know that nothing is real, right?
Right.
And so at that point it becomes like you got to find some kind of you got to find a balance. You've got to be able to find a way to have one foot in the spiritual world and one foot in the real world. Otherwise, if you got anybody that's oppressive in your life, they're going to block you up. You're going to go into the crazy place, you know what I mean? Or you're going to become homeless, or you're going to, and it's crazy that that's what a spiritual awakening, that's literally how hard it will hit you if you can't find a way to find balance. Because nothing, how do you motivate yourself to do anything when all of it is
An illusion.
an illusion? Exactly. Like, how do you, yeah.
So how have you found that balance? What are you doing now?
So how did I find that balance? What the universe will do during this process, it happens to everybody. It's going to make you face everything that you're scared of. Everything that you're scared of. Not being able to make an income the traditional way you used to. What other people think of you. Whether or not you can learn to like own your voice, speak your truth, your family relationships, your romantic relationships, every single one of them, it's going to purge. It's going to purge until you shed all of the layers of the unauthentic self, and you can actually look at yourself in the mirror and be like, oh yeah, so that all happened. And so what that looked like on the outside was a loss of my house, closing my company, moving from Atlanta to Colorado. I spent 6 months on the road traveling with my 2 kids, and finding a job as a campground manager. I have like 2,300 acres here in Colorado, and 8 months out of the year I live here in my 5th wheel, and then the other months of the year I rent some land down the hill. I only work for myself. So like, instead of trying to find different corporations and brands and news ops to like front and face, I make my own content. I'm at We Are Christ on TikTok. And I spend a lot of time being me, like just being me, like, which is, I used to commute. I remember one of the worst commute I ever had in Atlanta was, I mean, sometimes it would be upwards like 2 hours and 15 minutes, sometimes 2.5, from where I was all the way on the Northwest, all the way to Norcross.
Mhm.
Like this idea that all of my life was being sucked into. I had no time for my own brain. I had no time. And I was so caught up with what everybody else would think, or can I say this and still keep my job? And so I had to find a way to, and so, I just lowered my expenses. I sold all my shit. When you live in a fifth wheel, like the only things I have really are the things I enjoy and use on a daily basis. Right. Um, but all that other stuff I had to get rid of. And so I had to like decouple from materialism. But see, I could not have written this story for myself. The only person that can put you, this is like a Christ story. This is like a story that God writes for you
Mhm.
so that you can shed all the stuff systematically and get to a point of actual freedom. And so I'd say, I'll be 38 next month. I am the freest that I've ever been.
Mhm.
Um, I am not the most financially secure that I've ever been. I am not the most, I used to have a $3,000 a month mortgage, and I drove a Mercedes, drove Lexuses, Audis. Like, I was just living for stuff, and I don't live for stuff anymore. So like, I go skiing a lot. Like, I go rafting, you know, I stay away from people.
So how did your family take it as you started to research and start to learn all these information? How do your kids look at you? Do they look at, oh, mom's, mom's kind of crazy. Like, how have you been able to I'm just curious.
I remember when, oh, I'm sure there's been times. There's been times that yeah. Luckily, my youngest one was maybe 5 or so. And when I was going through it and having like, he's 10 now, past life sort of memories. And I was having this like sort of feeling of like, my youngest one was all about it. He was like, absolutely, I remember mine too. Like, because kids, right? Because kids,
Kids
like
are
he was
tapped in,
all
actually.
about it.
Yep.
Um, and my older one, he'll turn 18 this month, which is crazy. Man, the way he looks at the world now is amazing. Like he questions everything. Like there is nothing that he does not say, what is the real meaning behind this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think that my kids will at least have the ability to choose what life they want and I think that that's all anybody ever wanted. Like, at least give me the information. Like, do I want to like buy into the capitalist mumbo jumbo, have the stuff, do the thing, work the job? Do I want to, or do I not want to? The problem is that we weren't ever given a choice. We were told, go to school, go to college, do the job, work for someone the rest of your entire life, and shut up about it. And so I feel like at least my kids have enough information to know. I remember that when I watched this reptilian video once,
The who?
and like, so here's the thing, like, there's a lot of words for the same concept, right? And when I'm talking about lizard people, I'm not saying there's lizard people, but this idea of lizard people, this idea of a society that runs things that is hidden from view, right? They call them the reptilians. But I remember the first time I brought that, I came running in. You're not going to believe this video I found. And the look on my son's face, like that's enough. So, but I mean, the problem is I'm too open-minded. Like, there's nothing that I won't consider, whether or not it's true or not, because what
Mm-hmm.
I've figured out so far is that all these things that seemed impossible are not in fact impossible.
Right. All right. So look, we're about wrapping things up. I want to ask you 3 questions that I'm going to hopefully ask all my guests. Why are we
Okay.
here as humans, or why are you here specifically? What's your mission here on Earth?
My mission here on Earth is to build the bridge to something better. And building that bridge involves becoming aware of the matrix that is in place that is preventing us from creating this better existence. And so my purpose is to build a bridge for people through informing. Here lately, it's become almost ridiculous the amount of entertaining I have to do to get through like suppressions of free speech, quite honestly. I feel like I'm becoming a master tap dancer in the name of humanity.
Hmm.
But that's what I'm willing to do any way I can to find a way to you know, and also my own life, and also to have my own life become a mirror for other people to see how you can get away from things if you start thinking non-traditionally about what your life could look like.
I think that kind of runs into my second question, which is what do you want to accomplish? So you kind of already answered that, I feel like. Yes. All right. So
Yeah,
my
yeah,
last
yeah.
question is, what advice would you give to someone who is just starting their spiritual awakening?
It's all going to be okay. You're protected and provided for. Yes, validation to you for what you're feeling. Validation, yes, it's nuts. Accept it and now get to changing your life accordingly. But you're going to be okay. Like, it's all written. It's all been written. You're going to be okay.
All right. So Shay, how can people connect with you if they want to learn more about you, or they want to find you? Where should they go?
If you're on TikTok, it's at We Are Christ. And from there, I've got a link tree that you can see all of my different social medias, all of the different places you can support me, all the different places I make content. Yeah.
Shay, I want to thank you so much for being my first guest. Thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks for shedding light on all these spiritual information that you're learning. Thanks for sharing. And I will hopefully see you soon.
Absolutely. This was fun. Thanks, Amani.
See you later.